Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Web Boxing 101 podcast, episode number 6. I am your host, Luis Trevino, also known as Tree. On this episode 6, Thursday night, here coming to you by way of Warriors Edge Boxing Gym Promotions. That's right, folks. We're here coming to you by way of Warriors Edge. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining me, everybody from Las Cruces, Ciudad Juarez, Albuquerque. Got a shout out to them out there. Midland, Odessa, all the surrounding gyms that are joining us, our local boxing commission, people from Golden Gloves El Paso, people from West Texas Golden Gloves, and just any boxing fan. And also I want to welcome all my new subscribers that are listening to me tonight. I want to big a shout out to Billy at Cavender's Western Wear. Billy, I know you're listening out there. And just in general, all my boxing fans out there tuning in tonight and tuning in every Thursday. And just a quick reminder, everybody, that, the podcast was created to talk about boxing. And that was the main thing. And talk about issues in boxing, whether they were negative or positive. But it was never intended, and it'll never be intended to target anybody in particular. Maybe there's going to be some opinions about the system, about a call, about the way things are going. Just like in any business and in any sport or any podcast, people are going to have their opinion, and they're entitled to their opinion. That's what makes this country so great. We're entitled to our opinion and the freedom of speech. But folks, just remember one thing: it's not targeted for anybody in particular, and I wouldn't. I wouldn't have it another way. That's not the intention of this podcast. We want to highlight the athletes. I've seen in my past podcasts, we've highlighted athletes. We've highlighted athletes that are advancing to nationals, that have done something in boxing in general. I've highlighted other gyms as well. So if you've listened to my past podcast, we've been pretty fair in this game, and I want to continue to be fair in this game, because that's what Warriors Edge Boxing is all about: being fair and taking that constructive criticism. I'm pretty sure in the future, as this podcast grows, there's going to be some criticism coming my way, but it's all constructive, guys. And again, it's not the intention to harp at anybody or any organization from here on out, or even when I started. So that's what I wanted to introduce my show with. Also, I want to give thanks to everybody at Golden Gloves this past weekend. That people that went to Golden Gloves and sat there and enjoyed the fights despite the conditions. Holy Mother of God! Despite those conditions at the Coliseum, the judging arena, it was pretty bad, man. For the fighters, it was cold. I know the first night it was raining. We were out there with one of my fighters. It was pretty bad, the conditions, and we go back to the venues. Why don't we get the best venues, the better venues for our kids? But you know what? Nevertheless, big shout out and kudos to all those men and women from the Golden Gloves, from the local boxing commission, all the way, people from taking care of the tickets at the front door, the officials, the refs. Everybody. I mean, I gotta tell you, man. They did a magnificent job. And you look, man, they're on their own time. I mean, on their own dime. Nobody pays them to volunteer their time, and they were still out there braving the cold and rain, shine or snow. They were out there. They were out there doing great work. So I want to thank them, man. I mean, they were out there on their own time and in those conditions, all those 3 days. They did a hell of a job, and I want to thank them all for doing a hell of a job. Local Boxing Commission, great job to you all, guys, for doing what you do day in and day out. So I wanted to give a shout out to that, and then also I want to give a shout out to all those people, the fighters, the teams that went out there, to compete, all the way from the out-of-towners as well, to coming into El Paso and competing again in those bad conditions. I want to give them a kudos, and all from our local fighters and all the winners and losers of the tournament as well. In my book, there is no losers. Everybody was a win-win. It was a good Golden Gloves, and folks, it can only get better, and I hope it does get better. So the first topic that we're going to talk about before we get to our co-host this evening is out of True Sport, out of USA Boxing articles that we dug up, my producer dug up, and it's called Bad Call, the best way for coaches and parents to respond to bad calls, because we're all in this together as far as team USA Boxing, right? And we're all going to agree that bad calls happen, right? They happen in youth sports, high school sports, professional sports, and even in the Olympics. Of all the places where officiating mistakes happen, youth sports are probably where they matter the least. But it's on the sidelines of kids' games that we can often see parents and coaches lose their cool. We often see it more and more. Before we look at 3 categories of bad calls and how to deal with them, it is crucial for all parents and coaches to remember that the referees in youth sports are often volunteers. Even those who are paid are likely refereeing out of their own love of the sport. It's out of the love of their sport. They are human. They make mistakes. Making accurate calls is important, but if we are looking to youth sports to teach the kids valuable lessons about sportsmanship, like we've talked about before, responsibility and competition and handling adversity, then it is important, ladies and gentlemen, to realize that missed calls play a necessary role in teaching these valuable lessons. In one of my podcasts, we talked about those valuable lessons for the young boxer or athlete, right? Let's look at 3 categories right now 3 categories of officiating errors and how parents and coaches can best respond to them, right? For example, the referee missed it. A referee can't be everywhere at once, right? They're human. And there is no instant replay in youth sports. Sometimes things like a handball in soccer, a travel in basketball, or an out of bounds in field hockey simply get missed because the referee wasn't in the position able to see it. And in boxing, not all the time, guys, are going to see it, and they're not going to be in the best position possible to make the call. Play continues with this type of error, even though the correct call would have resulted in stoppage of the play. The players involved often know the error occurred, and parents and coaches who happen to be in the right position see the foul and know it occurred, so what should happen next? Coaches don't overreact. Don't overreact to individual instances of missed calls due to unseen infractions. It is becoming a consistent problem, folks. Either in your team's favor or not, have a calm conversation with the referee during the stoppage of play, after the fight, all right? If it is allowed by rules and regulations. Referees want to perform, of course, as well as they can, and pointing out a consistent problem can help the referee to address it, right? Your players' attitudes and actions will reflect your response to missed calls. If you express anger or frustration, they are likely to respond that way as well. Right? They're only human, guys. When talking to your players, use this type of missed call as an opportunity and look at it as an opportunity, guys, right? To point out that the things don't always go their way, right? Look at it that way. But you have to keep playing and focus on what you can control, because you cannot control human error, right? Another way to approach it is to encourage your players to perform their best so the game is not close enough that a missed call would affect the outcome. And this is all in youth sports, and we see it time and time. I remember having my kids in t-ball and in baseball and basketball, and when I was growing up playing in sports, it all happened so often. I remember one time, especially in the t-ball games, man, I would see parents lose their mind, and then they go after the coaches, and what happens, man? Your athlete, your son, sees their parents lose their cool, and you're not teaching them those valuable lessons, right? The other category is the referee misjudged it, right? This category of officiating errors focuses on infractions the referee sees, but misjudges in terms of severity. For instance, a shove, a kick to the shins, or elbow to the ribs may look pretty benign from the one angle, but very rough from another, right? Compared to missed calls, misjudged calls often have an impact on player safety. In some cases, referee may be too lenient and allow rougher play that endangers athletes. In other cases, referees are hypersensitive to contact and call fouls that seem unnecessary. And we see it in boxing as well, right? Some referees are hypersensitive, some are not. And they miss the calls, or it's their day to do, or you've seen referees that it's not their day, right? Coaches, if the official is being too permissive of rough play, right, this is it, and your players are at risk, speak to the official immediately to encourage them to be more proactive about controlling aggressive play. It looks like I'm talking about communication skills. And basically, folks, that's all it is. It's having the proper communication, interpersonal communication to deal with judges, to deal with coaches, or deal in general with the association. You can also adjust your player matchups or game strategy if possible. I don't know. To reduce the frequency of contact with players who are being aggressive. On the other hand, guys, if the official is highly sensitive to infractions, work with your players to be even more conscious of how they're playing, right? This can be a useful lesson on adapting to the situation. So also you take it back to the gym and you also train for the worst case scenario, and you train for what if you get that that hypersensitive judge or that very aggressive judge or referee. Train for that too, and also instill the seed in their mind, plant the seed in their mind, instill the seed that, you know what, things can happen, right? Watching someone be rough with your kid is hard to handle calmly. I get it, I understand, but losing your temper isn't going to help either. Let the coaches and referees handle it on the ring, on the field. If you feel the need to make your voice heard, talk to your team's coach, talk to your coach. Avoid the urge to yell at the ref, and absolutely refrain from yelling directly at the opposite player, and we've seen that too. If your player or team is getting called for infractions based on a highly sensitive referee, use the opportunity to reinforce the idea that you have to learn how to adapt to the situation and find a way to perform to your best. Last but not least, the referee got mixed up. Sometimes officials make mistakes, like losing track of a number of players on the field, right? The rounds. I've seen referees lose. What round was this? Or they hear the 10-second count and they think that is the bell. You know, these situations are best handled with a sense of humor, right? In competitive club and school sports, there may be more formal process of correcting officiating errors. Parents, if you notice the error, bring it to the coach's attention instead of directly confronting the official. The coach is the person designated, authorized. He's a coach, has a coach's book to make those decisions on your boxer's behalf or the team's behalf. And in a loud environment with voices coming from all directions, the coach is a person an official will pay attention to. How crazy does it get on the ring? It gets very crazy. In the amateur world, it gets real crazy. Everybody's yelling. So you just imagine an angry coach, an angry parent, or an angry parent yelling at the official. It's just going to make things worse, right? Youth sports, even competitive youth sports, are supposed to be a positive experience for young players. Our local boxing commission, USA Boxing, at that level, we want to make sure that our players, our people going to see our events, they have a positive experience. Accurate officiating is important, 100%. But the big picture's lessons that can be learned through your sports participation are achieved through wins and losses, good calls and bad. Hey, man, you got a bad call. That's going to test your character. Hey, guess what? That's going to make you a better athlete, a better person. You can always have it in a win-win, and we get it. The referees will miss calls. We get it. They are human. So, folks, that was my bad call introduction verse of everything that I just talked about being a good parent, but also being a good coach. And then also, guys, realizing that our refs are human as well. And for the most part, they volunteer their time to be out there. And they also, just like your athletes, they go to the gym and they want to perform at their highest levels. Hey, guess what? Our referees also want to perform at their highest level. They do, man. They're human just like us. So, hey, man, take a step back, listen, and if you have a bad call, go back to your gym and work on it. And tell your fighters, you know what? I had a bad call today. This is what I need to do. This is what we need to work on. We're not going to win them all. We get it. But yelling and ranting and throwing tantrums is not going to help the cause. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you have any questions, respond. We're live right now. You can chat right now live on my page. You can chat as well on the recorded face of the podcast to listen to it later or whatever the case may be. Hey, man, respond to all this if you have a question or something like that about bad calls. But nevertheless, guys, we're all in this together. And kudos to all the participants this week and all the local boxing commission. Wow. All right. And don't forget that this podcast is being sponsored by Sweetwater. all my good friends at Sweetwater with all the technology and podcast equipment. They are going to be the supplier of Web Boxing 101. Also being presented to you by Ambery Health. Go visit Marlene and Ambery Health for those CBD oil stuff that she carries. She was one of my guests last week. So we want to dig a big shout out to all my sponsors to making this podcast available. All right, so let's get right in there, guys. It's going to be a short show, but like always, we have some good co-hosts, good guest of honor. And you know what? I'm going to bring the best of the best, guys. I'm going to bring fighters. I'm going to bring pro fighters. I'm going to bring people that have made a difference in the sport, that are tying with boxing, that are tying with something like that. We want to bring in the best of the best. And like I said, this podcast is getting better as the time goes on. Our guest for tonight is a good friend of ours, a good friend of the boxing world. He's been in boxing for a long time. He's done some great things in boxing. He's a great family man. But he has some tales to tell about his boxing career. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you our guest of honor, my co-host, Jo Galarza. Jojo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Tree. Thanks for having me on here.
We're glad to have you, Jojo. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, sir.
Good. Hey Jojo, we're gonna hook you up. You're on the hot chair. You're on the barber's chair. So we're gonna hook you up with some questions. Hope you're ready to go. But first of all, tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you doing now? What have you been up to? Or tell us about growing up in El Paso.
All right. Well, let's see. I've grown up in the sport for a while. My father was the great Rocky Galarza here in El Paso, a well-known trainer back in the days. Training in the likes of someone like Mr. Herman Delgado, a good friend of mine, a good friend of the family as well. I right now working with the NASA aircraft as an aircraft mechanic and helping out here with Warrior's Edge when I have my free time. Working with the NASA with training of the kids down here.
Well, that's good. I mean, and you mentioned your dad. You mentioned your father, Rocky, and we'll get into that as well, right? We'll get into what your dad did in the sport. I remember your dad as well, and it was ironic that me and you ended up knowing each other. I remember doing a professional fight at Cohen Stadium. You were on the card. I didn't know you, and I actually announced a pro fight for you. Do you remember that?
Yes,
that day?
Yes,
did you win that fight?
I did, sir. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
You won the fight, and there's a good picture. We'll post it up on the website. When Rocky Burke, another great professional ref that we will have on the show in the near future, lifted your hand when I say, and the winner by unanimous decision, Jo Galarza.
Yes,
Galarza. So that was awesome as well. So great to know. So what high school did you go to, Jojo?
I originally went to high school in the Northeast, Parkland High School. And
you're a Northeast guy.
Northeast, yes, sir.
That was rough.
And getting into a little trouble down there in the Northeast. Nothing big, but ended up moving over here on the east side with my father and ending up graduating at Eastwood High School.
So you moved from Parkland, man, one extreme to the other?
Yes, sir.
Northeast, right? Or to Eastwood,
East,
right?
Yes, sir.
Man,
yes,
dollar
sir.
signs all over the place, right?
Yes, sir.
Those Eastwood people, man.
Well, my mom and dad were divorced, so during that time, I was living with my mom, and so my mom, since then, she tells my dad, you need to take care of your son, not in a good way. So basically, when my dad confronted me in that situation, he put me and looked me straight in the eye, because I grew up in the gym. I could hit a speed bag, I can hit a punching bag, I can do all that, but I never stood in the ring with somebody. I grew up at Carolina Center, growing up in the boxing gym every other weekend of the month. And long story short, I did not really know the sport of boxing until I was confronted in front of somebody else that knew how to fight. And that's pretty much what my dad did. He humbled me. He put me in the ring. He says, "You think you're bad?" I say, "Yes, sir." He goes, "All right, we'll get in the ring." Long story short, the guy beat me up, embarrassed me, and humbled me in the end. So that's when I started to really learn the sport of boxing at the age of 13, really getting into it.
So that was your amateur life and your start. And so
Yes,
where did you start boxing? Where did you start? Where would you box?
Originally, during that time, I had the background in the Carolina days and growing up. Back then, if I can remember, Herman was back there, Rene Herrera, some of the local greats here as well. But by that time, when I really started getting into it, he had opened a bar called Rocky's, and he had a little boxing gym in the backyard. Actually, it was a nice boxing gym in the backyard, fully set up with lights to cover the ring, and bags all in the patio. So we had everything back there. It was cold when it was cold. It was hot when it was hot, but we had to work through it. But that time, starting at 13 years old, that's when I really got into it.
So how many amateur fights do you have?
If I could go back to include the Juarez times, I have roughly close to about 75 fights and maybe a little over 15 losses.
75. Wow.
Yes, sir.
And I know you went pro at what age, Jojo?
I want to say I started late. I did my Air Force career first, and then I was in my late 20s. And I started in 05, and I had my first fight there at Cohen Stadium. My first 4 fights were at Cohen Stadium, and that was in 05. I won my first one and lost my second one, won my third one, and won my fourth.
And what was it like? What is the difference between getting in a pro fight and an amateur fight? Besides the equipment, of course, there's no headgear. But what's the difference? What does it feel like?
Oh, it's a big time different adrenaline flow. You know that you have no headgear. That's one. You know the gloves are smaller. The crowd is real. There's beer. There's alcohol. The words are straightforward. Nobody's holding back what they need to say. People want to see blood. You know that as a fighter, and people want to see action. So it was nerve-wracking. It's a big difference because you know that it's all controlled, but you have the controlledness in the amateur side where you know the parents are just there and they're hoping that their kids don't get hurt, but now you're an adult and you're pro and you have a lot more to prove.
So what was your earnings in pro, if you can say? What did you make for those fights?
If I remember, after paying out everybody, maybe about $400, $500.
$400 to $500 on a pro fight.
Yes,
that
sir.
was promoters, right? No names.
Yeah, yes, sir.
All right, so
Four-rounder.
A four-rounder,
Yes, sir.
$400, $500. Is that what a young kid moving up to pro fight can expect? Those type of money to start, or?
It's depending who you get hooked up with and who's gonna guide you in the right directions. Not that I didn't have the right guidance. I used the sport of boxing because I loved it, but I didn't take it as thinking it was gonna be my career for my life. So I did it on a periodic basis.
So you mentioned your Air Force. You're a veteran.
I served 8 years, yes, sir, in the Air Force.
In the Air Force,
yes, sir.
And that was going to be your career. So that was smart. You said, "Look, man, I'm probably doing this for fun, make some extra cash, but I'm still going to pursue my dream, maybe of being in the military." And you served in the Air Force.
I did, yes, sir.
Proudly in the Air Force. So thanks for what you did. And now, because of the Air Force, what do you do now?
I'm an aircraft mechanic for NASA. We work on the NASA T-38 aircraft. And we're like a depot facility where we just keep up in all the mods of the aircraft for the NASA aircraft planes, excuse me.
So you work for NASA. Good.
Yes, sir.
So now, I mean, of course, way different realm of career, or it's not even close to contact sports and nothing. It's a career. Yes. So what do you do? Are you still involved in boxing right now?
Yes, sir. I do my best to try to help out, and as much as I can. I do have my kid that I'm trying to upbring through the wrestling and jiu-jitsu side of everything. Keep him busy and out of trouble.
Okay, so it's fair to say. Let me stop you there. Can you tell us about your kid? I know he's a sensation. He's gonna be a superstar. He is a superstar at his age. I've heard a lot about Aiden. Can you tell us a little bit of what he does and where is he going?
Well, right now he's obviously going to school. He's wanting to be a wrestler just like his older brother Jojo Jr. at that, and he actually ended up getting into the jiu-jitsu side as well because the coaches are jiu-jitsu and wrestling coaches, so that kind of helped out his ground game. And whenever I can, and I bring him here to the gym as much as I can here at Warrior's Edge to help him learn the upper game and be confident in himself. But all in all, he's a dedicated kid. He loves the sport, and he pushes himself to succeed.
Yeah, and I'm
very proud of him.
Man, and you should be. I know I see him when he comes to Warrior's Edge Boxing. Kid is very committed, very talented kid. Man, he's primo, man. He is, folks, if you've never seen Aiden, he is an athlete, awesome kid. He's going places. Man, I tell you, very dedicated kid in the ring. He's a kid overall, right, of course. But I'm pretty sure, JoJo, that when it's time to fight, and I've seen videos, he's on YouTube, it's all about business, right?
Yes, sir.
All business. Very talented kid. Well, we wish him the best, JoJo.
Thank you.
And it runs in the blood. Contact sports runs in the blood, right? And in the same and along those lines, can you tell us a little bit about your dad, Rocky Galarza?
Yes, sir. He was here. Like I said, he was a local favorite here. Boxing coach, 1949 Bowie Bear, part of the team then. Football player and trainer here locally. Good man. You know, he pushed his when he was the boxing trainer, pushed his kids to be the best. Never indirect, always told it directly how it was. Didn't beat around the bush when training his kids to be their best. Straight up, straightforward, and that's what I loved about my dad. There was no beating around the bush. Just told you how it was.
Well, yeah, and I've heard a lot of stories of your dad. True boxer. Rough on the edges, but he taught a lot of people boxing, and he'll always be remembered here in El Paso. Just taking a quick pause here of the podcast. I just want to say hello to all my live chatters up there. We're going to give a shout out to Nightmare Boxing. Shout out to Mr. Herman Delgado, is always live with us. What's up, Herman?
Hey, Herman.
Nightmare Boxing, welcome to the show. Mr. Acevedo Edward is on live chat as well. We want to say hello to them. He mentioned that most negative people don't know boxing. That's what Edward Acevedo said. Herman Delgado wants to know if you're an astronaut with NASA, JoJo.
No, the monkey took my job. I tried, but the monkey got it.
Wow. Okay. Well, and again, we wanna thank everybody that's going live right now. All right, moving along with those questions, and as I see questions coming up, and Tocayo said, "What's up, JoJo?"
Hey, what's up?
And you mentioned that your dad got you into boxing. I'm going to ask you the amateur program here in El Paso. If you would change one thing about the amateur boxing program, what would it be?
I would say that probably a little bit more advertisement. I honestly didn't know. Being that I had been out of town, that would be my only reason I'm not being there this weekend. I honestly didn't know too much about the Golden Gloves tournament this weekend. Not much advertisement through any type of commercials, maybe through schools, since it's during the school time frame where we can at least put our programs out there to support it. And other kids might get interested, parents might get interested, other venues might get interested in promoting it and allowing the amateur boxing program excel more.
Well, I mean, and we're going to get into all that, what you said, but if you would change one thing, it was probably more promoting of events in amateur, you mean?
Promoting it, like just getting it out there more flyers. Right. More flyers, like in the say, like the convenience stores, the grocery stores, anywhere that you can put where you know that kids are at, where people can see that, hey, there's some events that are happening that are youth involved, so that you can bring more attention to the sport.
All right, and you know what? With that, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna ask you. In the last podcast, Jojo, we discussed about boxing being introduced into the high schools, right? As a sport, just like wrestling, football. What do you think the chances of that happening? Do you like that idea? Maybe one day boxing being introduced. And I know in one of my podcasts, one of my co-hosts said that, maybe not. There's not that much interest. I've also heard people in my live chat say, well, you know what, there's football, boxing's too dangerous. But I think football is just as dangerous as boxing, man. And I even know wrestling is dangerous. You have broken bones, head contusions, all that. So why do you think there's a chance for boxing to come into the high schools? Why do you think it's not, or what is your take on that?
From my understanding, back in the days, and of course I understand that's back in the days, and I remember looking at an old picture from Bowie High School of my dad being on the boxing team.
So Bowie had a boxing team?
I believe so, because the picture I saw in the yearbook back then said boxing team. So,
wow, I didn't know that, man. I'm surprised Junior Vicencio didn't tell us that.
I don't know. And
Junior's an encyclopedia of the history of boxing.
And again, I could be wrong, so don't quote me. Don't say Joe said this, but just like I said, there was a Bowie picture back in the days of my Bowie boxing team. Maybe I misread it. I don't know, but that's what I read. And to bring it back into the school, or to bring it into the school, I know there might be some liabilities, some insurance things.
So what's the difference with the liability in football? Football is just as violent, folks. What do you guys think? I mean, I think football is just as violent. I mean, I think well, wait a minute. I think if you look at the top 3 most dangerous sports, the number 1 is cheerleading. It is.
Doing a flip and breaking your neck.
Maybe, but it's still in the high school. So what do you mean liability? What do you mean issues, Jojo? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the liability of somebody getting hurt, brain damage, without a helmet. I know we have headgears for the amateur side. Again, I don't know the difference in the sports from boxing amateur to the injuries in football / wrestling and / basketball, any type of physical sport where you're actually having any type of contact. So I don't know the difference or what type of liability would be needed, but I believe that it would bring, in some schools, it would be good to have that type of sport.
Why not? I mean, I know. Also, you mentioned. I know in the past we've mentioned about one sanctioning or one entity that we all go by in Colorado, just one. What about having others, right? Maybe that's maybe why they don't introduce it to high school. There's got to be a legitimate reason. I understand, but it's interesting, don't you find it interesting? It'd be nice to have a boxing team controlled in a controlled environment when you train these kids. Because I believe, and in my opinion, it's just as dangerous as football. It's just as dangerous as cheerleading. It's just as dangerous as any contact sport. But so why not? I mean, I think it'll be very interesting, and I think if that would happen, it will bring back the sport of boxing. But then also you got, how come not bringing MMA into high school? You know, all those contact sports, you know.
Well, wrestling is almost a sort of MMA style.
Jiu-jitsu, MMA style, yeah. So I wonder, I mean, it'll be good. I mean, you know what? I'm going to keep pushing for that. I think it'll be great to bring to some high schools a boxing team because you mentioned it too, you know, and we've mentioned it in the past that boxing builds character, man, and it builds kids, man. Kids don't want to play football. Kids don't want to have a structured sport. Some kids are better off by themselves, and boxing gives them that avenue of escape to be by themselves and to train. Because look, man, as a gym owner, I see them here every day.
It gives you that confidence in yourself.
Yeah, in yourselves, and I think it will succeed in high schools. I really do.
I do too. It also can be used like our recreational centers, like here at Warrior's Edge, an opportunity to find yourself in not getting into trouble, getting a outsource or an outlet so that you can let off steam, so that if you want to train, there you are already at school, you don't need a ride, you're already there, you can train.
And you know what, I know that boxing is a very jealous sport, but I mean, and I think boxing is above about it because we like boxing. But I mean, if we compare to other sports, it's at the same level of any sports. You go to any park right now, they're packed. Soccer, football, and parents are dishing out the money to get their kids trained in baseball, t-ball, you name it. There's academies of baseball. There's everything, and boxing seems to be left in the back and in the dust. And I think if this sport was introduced in high school at a control level, or even having a pilot program of 4 high schools, getting a boxing team, having a pilot program, it'll be good. You know what I mean? So I think it'll make a big difference, and it'll attract more kids to the gyms. Yes, and also to the sports of high school, because there's a lot of kids in high school that are sitting there and they don't want to compete, man. They don't want to play with other players. Boxers don't play well with others. They beat their heads apart.
Yeah. Well, it also brings you a sense of pride in yourself, and that you know that you can push yourself to those levels and accomplishing the training. Like I said, I think it'd be a great opportunity for a lot of kids to show their character, because it does bring a lot of discipline. Not to take anything away from any of the other sports, but it's a disciplinary sport. You have to push yourself to your next levels. You have to be dedicated. You have to leave all the other stuff out on the street that you might like as a kid, be tempted by drugs, alcohol. It's a good sport for that to be, because you know if you go in that ring and you're doing all that stuff on the side, you know you've made that choice, and it's gonna show the effect in the ring.
Yeah, well, it's good that you mentioned the dedication of the fighter as well. Let me just go back to the live comments here. We want to say hello to Victor Bugarini. How are you, sir? I know you're on the live chat right now. Herman Delgado just put, Rocky was the best, hard-ass coach who made us the best. He trained us to fight, not to make excuses. We also want to make a shout-out to Yarid. He's in the same gym as you. Shout out to the 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu team.
What's going on, sir?
Juan Silva, how are you? Thank you for being on live to this podcast as well. So again, I want to thank everybody for being on my live podcast as well. So good job to everybody out there, and continue posting, guys, and being out there live as well. So and I think this is going to be a topic that we're going to keep discussing. We're gonna keep discussing about bringing, and I'm gonna push it, man. I want to bring boxing into high schools.
Yeah.
It'll be great. I think it'll be very good. Not just the rec centers. I think boxing getting introduced to high schools should be brought in a controlled environment. It's in the Olympics. Why not in high schools? Folks, comment, man, and let's petition it. Let's get ready to go and get this going as well. Very important. So. You mentioned that your son is in MMA, and we mentioned a big shout out to the 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. And I want to just mention something to everybody out there. This is a boxing podcast, Boxing 101, right? But this is also a tribute and a shout out to all contact sports gyms, from karate to judo to everybody in the jiu-jitsu MMA world here in El Paso, like the people in 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, Bushido Training Academy. This is also to you guys, and I want to, and again, this is not just about boxing. I really want you to come on the show and talk about your sports and your tournaments, because we're all in this together, bringing awareness to kids and showing them how to fight and defend themselves. But also we're one united family, and yeah, having some confidence in all the kids. And I know our sports bring that. So wanted to point that out, that, I want to invite all the jiu-jitsu gyms, MMA, that this is also your podcast. Warriors Edge Boxing 101 is a podcast for El Paso contact sports, and also inviting all my surrounding gyms, like all the way from Midland to Albuquerque. Right, JoJo?
Yes, sir.
Exactly. So in the last podcast, we also talked about MMA. But let's talk about this, and I know in ESPN they've discussed it, and if you even stream it, a lot of people have discussed this topic called boxing versus MMA. Do you think that boxing is losing fan base and or being forgotten because of MMA sport at both the levels, amateur and pro?
I haven't seen too much on the amateur level as far as the MMA and any sport back there, but in the pro side, you have the UFC, and you have other promotions and other companies that carry the MMA side. But you have a lot of people that you see them on the TV and you see the crowd and it's crazy packed. Then you have the boxing side and you have the same, depending on the promotion, you have the same amount of people and the fighters making more money. With that being said, as far as the competition side, well, right now you have the boxing promoters all on war against each other. Nobody wants to fight their fighter with their fighter. The sanctions, I think, are not doing their job to make sure that all the fighters are fighting each other.
You mean in boxing?
In boxing.
You know, coming up on the show, I'm going to introduce. One of my co-hosts will be Ray Mancera from the WBC. Hopefully, we can nail that co-host to come out here, and he's going to talk about. He's going to talk about those the unifications, the belts, what it means. A lot of people want to know, why is there so many belts? Yeah. The green, the red, the IBO, the WBA, the WBC. We want to know about those belts. But he's going to come in here. We're trying to get that nailed so he can be one of my co-hosts, and he'll answer some of the questions. But let me touch back here at the amateur level. You did mention, we talked earlier, and I don't know if Jojo mentioned everybody, but Jojo's one of my coaches here at the gym, and we've discussed this before. We've discussed the wrestling / MMA. Can I say that? Not insulting to the sport. Is it wrestling / MMA, jiu-jitsu? You mentioned that, and I mentioned in my last podcast or one of the podcasts that, you know what, man, it's huge. I mean, they sell out arenas for this sport. There's a lot of parents. There's a lot of people supporting that type of sport in El Paso, which is great. But why not boxing? Why are we not seeing the sellout crowds for our amateur kids? I mean, you go to volleyball tournaments, and it's sold out. I mean, these private volleyball clubs, and I think, Jojo, it's because high school catapults these private companies, and parents want more. So you mentioned it because Aiden is into that, and you've told me that these arenas are getting sold out. Tell me a little bit more about them and why. What is your fix on the boxing side?
Well, being that I've gone to the wrestling matches and the jiu-jitsu through my older son and now my youngest son, when I go there, it's already promoted at the gym. And then from that point on, we're spreading it out ourselves to our families and to our friends and all that. But when I get to most of these wrestling tournaments and the jiu-jitsu, the gyms are packed. The arena is packed. And the ticket prices are to get in as an individual is high, but the promotion on that end is, it's through me that I hear it is through the gym, and when we get there, they have tons of setups, food.
What do you mean setups?
They have all their stuff that they can sell through the whatever division they're representing. Tons of food outlets where you can go out and, I'm not saying tons of food outlets, but food where
you mean there's gorditas and tamales at those shows? What?
Sometimes there might be.
I think we're missing a beat here, man. You're listening to this. We need to get the food trucks in there. Gorditas for sale. I'm just playing.
Well, even at the high school wrestling, for whatever reason, again, like you're saying, any other sport, we're out there and we're supporting the kids for 12 hours sometimes. And everybody's out there, and our kids are wrestling probably about 2 to 3 to 5 times. I think the max is 7 times in a day per person. And with that being said, that's a very physical sport. My oldest son got his slammed on his head and knocked out for about 3 seconds. Woke up and we had to. They did their concussion check on him, and he was fine. And the next day he was wrestling again. So I don't know if.
So okay, let me ask you a question. So is there a commission for jiu-jitsu tournaments or the wrestling?
I don't know if there's I'm sure there is. Everything is controlled by commission.
I mean, you know that USA Boxing controls us, and there's guidelines that every LBC has to follow by, but that's it. There's only one. Is there more in wrestling and jiu-jitsu? For example, can we have a tournament in the west side the same day we can have the same tournament on the east side?
As far as that, I don't know if it's controlled like that, say for like a soccer tournament, football tournament, and all that. I haven't seen it at that time where you're wrestling one place and then going to another, jiu-jitsu in one place, going to another the next day, unless you enroll yourself, or there's another committee or club that's having another tournament at that time. And as long as the refs are available, and they're sanctioned or at that same time, and everybody's covered, yes, I think you can go from one to another.
So you think that there is enough kids to have two tournaments running simultaneously together? Can there be?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
You believe so? Maybe enough kids. When we're talking enough kids, how many matches are there?
When it comes to the wrestling, or both jiu-jitsu and wrestling?
Again, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know how that works, and that's why that's why we're here to learn. Yeah. I'm learning, that's why I'm gonna have people. I want to have people come in from the MMA gyms, from the jiu-jitsu, the ones that have tournaments. Come on into my show, man, and tell us all about what you guys do.
On the jiu-jitsu side, there's other people that can probably explain it better than I am, because I can, because my son is barely getting into it. However, what I see, it's you can go at one tournament and be there all day, but I've never seen a jiu-jitsu tournament, another jiu-jitsu tournament going on at the same time.
But is it fair to say that we have 300 people in that show?
Yes.
Easy. That much people, yes. Easy. And you said easy, like it's even more probably.
A most recent tournament that I took my son to in Colorado, Denver, Colorado, an entry of kids was about wrestling tournament in Colorado. Denver, Colorado was about 1,500 kids.
The producers.
1,500 kids, and that gym, they had 26 mats, and it was amazing. It was just full of full-time action.
But it just not just that. It takes a whole team to work. Yeah. Parents, kids, yes, signing up. How much is a sign up
for those type of tournaments?
For a kid
is about, for the wrestling side, I think it's about $49 to $59.
Match or the whole year?
No, for that tournament.
For that tournament.
Yes. For that tournament.
$60. The producer just said $60.
$60.
Let me tell you, man, $60 for that tournament, that weekend, and it's over.
That's not including your traveling over there.
So check this out. Boxing is $62 for the year.
For the year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap, huh? Yeah. But then again, we're not getting these big people in the tournaments. But you know what? It was fun to see, like to have booths maybe in their boxing and attract more people. Maybe entertaining booths or whatever the case may be. I know when we do the Clash of the Titans, we try to do we've even tried to do a fair at a car show, a concert, and it's all trial by error, man. Sometimes we've succeeded and sometimes we haven't.
I'm not just saying it, but the Clash of the Titans have been one of the best shows that I've seen for an amateur showing. It brings a lot of different people around. Everybody's interested, and it gets a good crowd. Yeah, I mean,
it takes a lot of work.
Promoted.
I mean, yeah, we promote it a lot, and everybody from the sheriff's office, community service helps us out a lot. Let's go back to the live chats. John Silva just said it was the NAGA, North American Grappling Association,
yes,
and
sir.
That's where you guys fought. Yarid fought there too.
Yes, sir.
His son, your son, that was in Colorado.
No, that one was Albuquerque.
That was in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Thanks for the shout out there, Herman. Good job, Tree. Great info that you're sharing with the boxing community. So let's go back now. You mentioned about the amateur, and we're talking about why the amateur does not succeed or compete with the MMA wrestling. What about in the pros? I mean, do you watch MMA pro fights?
I do. More of the UFC guys.
UFC,
the ones that interest me the most. That I haven't really had an opportunity to really watch. The ones that probably have a lot more dedication to the sport, but you see like the Conor McGregors, the Anderson Silvas, the old school.
I announced a professional UFC MMA fight. That's as close as I've been. I'm not into that. I don't watch it. I do like it, but I don't watch it. But I got to announce at Strikers Gym in Curitiba, Brazil. I did the co-main event and main event. That was my first fight that I did in MMA, and Anderson Silva was there. So I got to announce that fight. But do you think the MMA, UFC has more fan base right now than our pro boxing?
I think it catches more of the younger crowd.
Really?
I do. As you can see, you have all the gyms that are opening up that have the UFC style, MMA style type of fighting and promote the fighting side of it. So you have a lot of youth that is being influenced. whether it be negative or good or bad, but it brings a lot of the attention to our youth. So that's where you see a lot of these gyms that are opening up.
Yeah, but in the pro level, Jojo, can you see in the pro level, as far as UFC, can you see fighter lasting like we see in boxing? Because you'll see like a fighter in boxing, like a Manny Pacquiao, lasts for a long time, and he continues. In the MMA world, he can be a champion for 1-2 months, and then he gets knocked out in 2 seconds, and then it's over for him.
Well,
that's what I've seen, right?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, there's another champion. What?
Yeah, I can only speak to the element that I know, which is the boxing side. And boxing side is, when I'm in the gym or in the ring for even the 1 minute or 3 minutes in the square, I'm already tired unless I'm in shape and dedicating myself to the sport.
Who's your favorite prize fighter in the sport?
Most recently, the one I've gotten most the likings to is the Mikey Garcia. He's going to be fighting here soon. March 13th, 19th?
Mikey
16th.
Garcia.
Against
March 16th.
Yeah, against Earl Spence. The reason why is I think he's a humble guy. I met him when you brought him around at the Clash of the Titans. Great guy.
What a great guy, huh?
Yes, very great guy. Very nice guy. Very humble. Didn't mind signing autographs, taking pictures back in the back with the fighters, with the local fighters.
And that's coming up. That's going to be at the Star Center in Frisco, Texas. Big fight. Who do you got? Earl Spence or Mikey Garcia?
That's a tough one to call, being that Mikey Garcia is moving up 2 weight classes. I give all my hopes to Mr. Garcia.
So hopes means that you're going for him? Or?
I'm going for him, and I think he has.
You heard that, Mikey? He's going for you.
I think he has a great opportunity, a great chance to win.
And he's one of those Mexican fighters that Mexican fighters have heart, that dedication. Yeah. But also, what's against Mikey is that he's fighting in Texas, and Earl Spence is from Texas. It's going to be an uphill battle for him. But you never know, man. Mikey Garcia might pull it off, and right after that, he might have. Guess what? He might have other people want to get him, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, it'll be a great fight to watch. Ready to go for that. It's going to be at the Star Center, home of the training facility of the Dallas Cowboys. What about Canelo, Daniel Jacobs? Who do you got on that one?
I'm looking like it might be, as much as I like both fighters, I believe that I'm looking at Jacobs. And the reason why I say Jacobs is because Jacobs gave Triple G a hard time.
Do you think Jacobs won the fight against Triple G?
I want to say it should have been.
It was that knockdown.
It should have been. It should have been Jacobs' fight. I think that's my opinion. Don't get mad at me.
Well, Canelo's goes for Jacobs' middleweight belt. If he does, the goal is to unify that division. That'll be a great fight. And if Canelo wins this fight, you never know. He might have Billy Joe Saunders on the table. Another rematch with Triple G. Just a lot of possibilities there for Canelo. Daniel Jacobs looks great. He looks strong. He looks very calm. And yes, I agree with you. It was a close fight against Triple G. Even though I saw Triple G winning it, edging it out, just because I like Triple G. But you know what? It'll be very interesting for Canelo. It'll be in Las Vegas. More fan base for Canelo. But hey, you know what? Daniel Jacobs is from New York.
Jacobs?
Yes.
Yes.
So they're going to be fighting in, I guess, Canelo's hometown. So I think any fighter that fights in Las Vegas, it's in their backyard, right?
Yes, sir. And real quick, one of my other favorite fighters is back the oldie Johnny Tapia and Eric Morales. And I can't forget our local fighters that have gone and made it pretty big. Juan Lascano, Antonio Escalante. I remember my dad taking me, and I really am a liking to Mr. Delgado. He's a great guy. I've grown up with him in my dad's gym, watching him fight at the Beach Bar on
Beach Bar. And you know what? Herman Delgado, going back to our live chat, just mentioned that Jacobs won over G. It was all about securing the G versus Canelo fight. I do agree with you, Delgado. Herman, that, yeah, man, he had to win that fight to secure a big payday with Canelo. John Silva also put Munguia is a great boxer coming up. That's another guy that, you know what, man, we can't overlook this guy. This guy's big and strong, and this guy wants the middleweights, man. I think this guy has the potential to beat Canelo. Big middleweight, young kid, but in the last fight, you saw his flaws. he got hit, man.
Oh, yeah.
He got hit, and he edged out a win. But that's another promising young talent coming up in the lights of the middleweights, right?
Yes, sir.
So interesting to see big talent coming up in the pro ranks. You mentioned Johnny Tapia as well. We miss him as well. Mi Vida Loca, good fighter as well. So big fights coming up, JoJo. Last but not least, what training advice can you give a kid that is moving up in the boxing world right now?
First, with everything concentrated in their school, make sure that education is first, because you can always have something to fall back on. And that's what personally my dad taught me, and I think it's the greatest advice you can give to a young, youthful person that's inspired by anybody. Study hard in school, and if you're going to go into the sport of boxing, you better, along with your school and whatever beliefs you have, put that right next to it, because the sport is hard. The sport can push you to your next levels, and if you're not taking it and you're not training hard, it can hurt you and it can damage you for the rest of your life.
Well, good advice there, folks. You've heard it from our former pro fighter, amateur sensation, Jo Galarza. It was a pleasure to have you on the sport.
Thank you, sir.
On the live chats as well. Nightmare Boxing put out a shout out to our own champ, Jennifer Hahn, that hopefully in the future we'll have on our show.
Yes.
Shout out to our local champs, right?
Yes, and Jennifer Hahn as well. Great fighter. Local fighters, and we need to support our local fighters, especially on the pro level and also the amateur level. But when we go to those pro fights, we need to get all those our El Pasoans there.
Get all the signs out for and you know what, JoJo? They do. Yeah. I mean, we've had some fights here. I know PBC has been out here. TG Promotions, Golden Boy. And yeah, we do have a good turnout. Late. I know the promoter's sweating it because El Pasoans always wait till the last minute, right?
Yeah.
And
waiting
you know
those ticket deals.
Waiting for ticket deals. But we are a fight town, man. They just wait for the last minute. Promoters probably sweating and saying, "Man, it's like 4 hours to the show, and only 300 tickets have been sold to a 4,000 seat arena." Yeah, he'd be sweating. That happens in the Clash, man. Everybody signs up at the last minute. They're rushing in the doors. But that's what El Pasoans do, right?
Yes, sir.
So yeah, support our local fighters, folks. It's important to get the word out for the local fighters as well. So, JoJo, it was great to have you on my show.
Thank you, sir.
Being a big support. Thank you, everybody, for live chatting. Last but not least, I want to talk about real quick about the 2019 Western Elite Qualifier and Regional Open Championships. We got some local fighters leaving out there for Reno, Nevada. Just a shout out to one of the kids here fighting out of Warrior's Edge. Andres Perez will be out there representing the gym. USA Boxing is heading back to the biggest little city in the world. The 2019 Western Elite Qualifier and Regional Open and Championships. Great big show, guys. It's going to be huge. Just some information, guys. It's going to be March the 23rd through March the 30th of 2019. For registration fees or online registrations, visit webpoint.usaboxing.org. There's going to be Elite Men's Division. So get out there, register. The Boxers Only registers for $25. The event location will be at the Grand Sierra Resort and Casino in Reno, Nevada. And remember this, all boxers must be registered online before March the 18th of 2019. Big show, Western Elite Qualifier. It's going to be a huge tournament for elite, youth, junior, intermediate, bantamweight, peewee, you name it. We're all going to be out there in strong force as we get closer. I will also talk about it a little bit more, but right now the 2019 Western Elite Qualifier fighters are signing up from El Paso, ready to go. So that's going to be interesting to see as well. Well, the show this week in the more local level, this Saturday, don't forget the Rodriguez Fight Team presents Spring Rumble at the Apollo Gym. Right, this Saturday at the Apollo Gym. The weigh-ins at the Apollo Gym is at 2011 Myrtle Avenue from 8 to 10 weigh-ins. Physicals are at 1:30. First bout starts at 3 p.m. For pre-matches, you can contact Joe Rodriguez at 915-626-8986. Boxers must be registered with USA Boxing, also have current physical done to participate. Again, contact information, Jose Rodriguez, 915-626-8986. And this is this weekend at the Apollo Gym, the Spring Rumble for a big show. Go out there and contact them as well. And then also, guys, as we get to the next podcast, we're going to mention the March 30th Las Cruces tournament. I'll get that information on the next podcast. But we also have a big tournament in Las Cruces March 30th. So if you're not traveling to Reno, you're going to stay here locally. We'll see you in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Well, folks, that's been my show tonight. I want to thank everybody for live streaming, listening to the show. Everybody that went live chat, I want to thank everybody for doing that. Comment on the recording live streams, on the recording podcast on YouTube, Web Boxing 101. Visit my website, www.warriorsedgeboxing.com. Stay tuned for my next co-host next week. And again, folks, things only get better and bigger, but because of you. Keep on supporting this. A big shout out to Sweetwater, all my people in Sweetwater, the official gear of Web Boxing 101. Big shout out to them as well. Chris Nunley out there at Sweetwater. And thanks everybody for checking me out. And like I've always said before, anything you do in life, put God first. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been my podcast, JoJo. We are out of here. We'll see you next week, folks. Thank you so much.